Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we are talking about the end of Napoleon, and what happens after. Let's jump right into it. Um, there are more pictures than there are slides to write, so take that into consideration and be happy. um, All right, so we're going to talk about the fall of Napoleon and the European reaction, chapter 4, lesson 4. Moving along here throughout the unit, um, we're almost done. I know in the last lecture we just talked about the rise of Napoleon. Well, it came crashing down. That was your warm up. Objective, we're going to explain how the French Revolution influenced ideas and events around Europe. Of course, that's where we're at. Oh my god. Well, all right. Starting off with a bang, you know what I'm saying? Winter is coming for all my Game of Thrones nerds out there. Winter is coming. So, Napoleon's fall from power began in 1812 when he decided to invade Russia. The Russians and the Romanovs had refused to remain in the continental system. Their economy was failing, not being able to trade with Britain. So, leaving Napoleon with no choice but to teach those Russians a lesson. Napoleon knew the risks of invading such a large country, but also knew that if he didn't punish the Russians for ignoring the continental system, well, others would follow. So, in June 1812, his grand army of more than 600,000 men entered Russia. In June, Napoleon's hopes and dreams were kind of dependent on a quick victory over the Russians, but they refused to meet Napoleon on the battlefield, mano a mano. They knew that he was very strong. I mean, he basically controlled the entire continent of Europe so far. So why do we need to lose our men? So instead, they will retreat. The Russians will retreat hundreds of miles inland, or that's eastward. As they retreated, they burned their own villages and countryside to keep Napoleon's army from finding food. And this is called scorched earth policy. They killed livestock, burned farms, burned they burned everything. They didn't want to leave anything for the invaders to, set up shop. And when there's no food around for them to, pillage and take over, well, they're not going to be there that long. So when they fought at the site, the Battle of Borodino, Napoleon's forces won an indecisive victory, costing him many tired soldiers' lives. When finally reaching Moscow, they found the city ablaze. With no food or supplies for his army, Napoleon abandoned the Russian capital in late October. So 5 months, 4 months. As the winter snows began, because, spoiler alert, they walked there. Just saying. They walked there. There are no cars. And when the horses died, guess what? You walked. Crazy, man. Crazy. So as the winter snows began, Napoleon led his great retreat west across Russia. Thousands of soldiers starved and froze along the way. Fewer than 40,000 of the original 600,000 arrived back in Poland. Now, I'm going to do some quick math. 40 divided by 600 times 100. That's 6.667% of that army returned back. Many deserted, the people that were forced to fight with Napoleon, they went back to their country, but the ones that came back with him totaled less than 40,000. So 6% of 6%. That's bad. This military disaster led other European states to rise up and attack the crippled French army. It's hard to go back to France and say, I need more men when you just lost 94% of your original army. I'm not good at math, but that's a lot of people. So Paris was captured March 1814. Napoleon was soon sent to exile to the island of Elba, which is in the Mediterranean, right off the coast of Italy. The victorious powers restored the monarchy to France in that person of Louis XVIII, brother of the executed King Louis XVI. Moving on. Ruh-roh. Let's go. Winter is coming for all my Game of Thrones nerds out there. This is his campaign from Kovna to Polotsk to Smolensk to Borodino to Moscow. So they finally fought September. So by October 18th, he left. Man, that sucks. Yeah. Here's some freezing Napoleons. Again, like I said, if you weren't an officer, you is walking. That's Moscow ablaze. Nothing there. This is like, I think this is an actual photo. I mean, this is 1814. Who knows? Maybe AI created this. But yeah, they don't look happy. So the sorrows of Boney, the meditations in the island of Elba. Elba, if you didn't know, is this little island right here. This little island of mine. And then you have Corsica, where he was born, right here. New king, who dis? The new king had little support, and the French people were not ready to surrender this glory of empire. Napoleon wasn't ready to give up either, as he was restless in exile. He will leave the island of Elba and slip back into France. King Louis the 18th sent troops to capture Napoleon, who opened his coat and addressed them. He said something like, I am your emperor, and if someone wants to murder the emperor, let them step forward and kill me. And no one shot. No one fired a shot as the people shouted, Long live the emperor, as troops went over to his side. March 20th, 1815, Napoleon entered Paris in triumph. So he wasn't even gone that long. I mean, they returned back in November. So by March, he was probably put in exile in, when did they lose? What, November? So, yeah. Very short time. Or maybe it was only a year. I take that back. It was only a year. So, poor guy. Russia, Great Britain, Austria, and Prussia pledged to defeat the man that they called the enemy and disturber of the tranquility of the world. Tranquility is another word for peace. Meanwhile, Napoleon raised another army of devoted veterans who rallied from all over France. He then readied an attack on the Allied troops stationed across the border in Belgium. It is the final battle of Napoleon. At the Battle of Waterloo in Belgium, June 18th, 1815, Napoleon met a combined British and Prussian army under the leadership of the Duke of Wellington, and he will suffer a bloody defeat. This time, the victorious Allies exiled him to the small, tiny island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. Napoleon would remain in exile until his death in 1821, but his memory haunted French political life for many decades. Excuse me, why am I yawning? So that's Louis the 18th. That's Napoleon entering back and people pledging to his devotion. Here's the Battle of Waterloo. Here's a map of Waterloo. And here's Napoleon thinking about all his L's. Now, if you want to know how far away he is, okay, look at this. This is Corsica right here, where this red dot is. The island of Elba is right where the I in Italy is. That was where he was exiled originally. This is France right here. Mans was sent below the equator. That's the equator, right? St. Helena right here. I mean, this whole thing is bigger than the island. He's so far away. He ain't coming back. No shot. So, reaction meetup. After the defeat of Napoleon, European rulers moved to restore the old order. Remember the old order, nobility, clergy, monarchies. This was the goal of the victors, Great Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, when they met at the Congress of Vienna, September 1814, to arrange a final peace settlement. That's a test question. The arrogant Austrian foreign minister, Prince Clemens von Metternich, was the influential leader at the meeting. That's also a test question. Metternich claimed that the principle of legitimacy guided him. He meant that the lawful monarchs from the royal families who had ruled before Napoleon would be restored back to their powers of position of powers. He meant, I just said that. This action, they believe, would ensure the peace and stability in Europe. They restored the Bourbon king in France, Louis XVIII. Practical considerations of power were also addressed at the Congress of Vienna. The great powers rearranged territories in Europe, believing this would form a new balance of power. The powers of Vienna also wanted to keep any one country from dominating Europe. This meant balancing political and military forces that guaranteed the independence of the great powers. And to balance Russia, for example, to balance Russian territorial gains, Austria and Prussia were given new territories as well. The Second Treaty of Paris, signed November 20th, 1815, came after the final defeat of Napoleon. Among other things, it reset the borders of France to match that of 1790. It also required France to pay heavy fines to the Allied nations. The Allied nations also set plans for the occupation of France and set rules on the future French military. So here's a picture of the Congress of Vienna and them meeting to discuss what's to happen. That's Prince Clemens von Metternich. This is the occupation of France. All right, step back. So the arrangements worked out at the Congress of Vienna were a victory for the rulers who wanted to contain the forces of change that the French Revolution had unleashed. These rulers, like Metternich, believed in political philosophy known as conservatism. Most conservatives at the time favored obedience to political authority. They believed that religion was so crucial to keep order in society. Conservatives hated revolutions and were unwilling to accept the demands of the people who wanted either individual rights or representative governments. Oh boy, going backwards, conserving power. Again, conservatism. To maintain the new balance of power, Great Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, and later France, agreed to meet in a conference to discuss their common interests and to maintain peace of Europe. These meetings became known as the Concert of Europe. No, they didn't play any music. The great powers adopted a principle of intervention. According to this principle, those 4 or 5 countries, had the right to send armies into countries in order to restore legitimate monarchs to their thrones. Britain argued that they shouldn't interfere in internal affairs of the other states. However, the other great powers used military force to end revolutions in places like Spain and Italy. Concert of Europe painting. Now they're like Thanos. I am inevitable. So between 1815 and 1830, conservative governments throughout Europe worked to maintain the old order. However, the powerful forces of change, liberalism and nationalism, were also at work. Liberalism is the political philosophy that grew out of the Enlightenment. Man, we stay talking about the Enlightenment, people. During the Enlightenment, a loose group of European American intellectuals were part of this, what to be called the Republic of Letters. Most Enlightenment political thinkers are considered to have taken part in this informal group. It's like the group chat of writers. And it included such names as Voltaire and Ben Franklin. These thinkers wrote back and forth, exchanging Enlightenment ideas on the failure of monarchy, inequality in society, and the need for government reform. This way, the revolutionary ideas of liberalism spread across Europe and America. So, liberalism, the opposite of conservatism, held that people should be free as possible from government restraint. Liberal beliefs include equality before the law and freedom of assembly, speech, and the press. They agreed that these freedoms should be guaranteed by a document, like the U.S. Constitution, aka the Bill of Rights. Many liberals also favored a government ruled by a constitution, a concept called, guess what? Constitutionalism. In a constitutional monarchy, a king or queen must follow the laws of the Constitution. Liberals believe that written documents would help guarantee people's rights because what's written is truth, or what's written is fact, and you have to follow that. So, I tried to find a lighter picture. I probably could have lightened it up in editing it, but he eased what he eased. Those darn liberals and their beliefs. So most liberals, these are all liberal beliefs, wanted religious toleration as well as separation of church and state. Liberals also demanded the right of peaceful opposition to government. John Locke. They believed that a representative assembly or legislature elected by qualified voters should make laws. These liberal ideas were similar to republicanism, the belief that a government's power comes from the rule of law and the peoples who are allowed to vote. Liberals took their revolutionary ideas only so far, though. Liberals believe that the right to vote and the right to hold office should only be open to men of property. In different locations, certain groups of people, such as enslaved people in America, were denied citizenship rights entirely. Liberalism would be tied mainly to middle-class men who wanted voting rights for themselves so they could share power with the landowning class that were above them. Liberals feared mob rule and had little desire to let the lower classes share power. And that's like, I should have had you write that down and read, but that's like the key to like society, in how we are as a government today, where in America, sure, we can vote, but our votes don't count for, president. And, it's this idea that the lower people, the people below the legislature, the middle class, shouldn't and cannot be trusted with voting, even though they can vote. And so where am I getting to this, Mr. Ovi? That's one of the flaws of the Electoral College here in America. But I digress. We're talking about Napoleon, or what used to be. Inspiration. So the Republican governments created by the American and French revolutionaries served as models of liberal ideas and action. There would be a revolt led by military leaders enforcing a liberal constitution in Spain in 1820. In 1820 as well, if you did. I think that's also the Mexican Revolution. I might be wrong. In 1820 as well, an uprising in Portugal resulted in the creation of a liberal constitution and government across the Atlantic and Latin America and the Caribbean. They were also emboldened by revolutionary ideas. That's what we're going to talk about in a few weeks, or next week, a few weeks. Most of the colonies in this region would fight and gain their independence in the 1820s from Spain, of all people. However, met with limited success, each new state arising from these revolutions would attempt to create a new Republican government founded on liberal ideas, which could stem from the Enlightenment. That's the Spanish uprising. That's the Portuguese uprising. That's the Spanish one. Nationalism. So as we've talked about last lecture, Nationalism arose when people began to identify themselves as part of a community, nation defined by a distinctive language, common institutions, and in some cases, religion. In earlier centuries, people's loyalty belonged to a king or queen or to a town and their region. In the 19th century, people began to believe that their chief loyalty was to the nation. Nationalism did not become a popular force until the French Revolution. From then on, nationalists came to believe that each nationality should have its own government. For example, the Germans were separated into many different principalities. They wanted national unity under one central government and a newly united German state. Subject peoples, such as the Hungarians, wanted the right to establish their own governments. They were tired of being part of Austria. Nationalism was a threat to the existing order. A united Germany would upset the balance of power set up at the Congress of Vienna, and an independent Hungarian state would mean breaking up the long Habsburg Austrian Empire. Conservatives feared such change and tried to repress nationalism. Nationalism will find a strong ally in liberalism. Most liberals believed that freedom could be possible only in people who ruled themselves. They now believed each group of people should have its own nation state. America. And there you go. That concludes this lecture. Stop sharing. Yeah, that concludes this lecture. Kind of long, kind of short. Mr. Ovi going on tangents, but it is what it is. So yeah, your homework is going to be page 161, 3 and 4. 161, 3 and 4. Only 2 questions. I'm so nice. And yeah, you know, as like we conclude the French Revolution. The fall of Napoleon concludes the French Revolution. So that list that I've been showing up on the board, like, know it. You don't need to memorize it, but just have it written down somewhere in your notes. Because all of that happened in a span of 15 years, 16 years, 20 years, 16 years, something like that. Anyways, you guys got your homework. If you guys did enjoy that, please hit that like button. Leave a comment, subscribe. See you in the next one. Peace.